Hello, everybody. So it's Wednesday, 8 o'clock. Welcome to Stanton Towers. What do you think? Just had the piano retuned. So got a very special guest this week. It's a good friend of mine who I think lives in the best part of the world, which is Cornwall. But so this week it's my great pleasure to bring on is Donna Morcom. Hey, Donna, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you, Darren?
I'm good. What's the weather like in Cornwall?
Oh, it's always glorious. Always glorious
Really?
in Cornwall. It's
Always.
it's God's country, obviously.
Absolutely. I know it's been a while since I came down, isn't it?
Yeah, it really has. It really has. Although, to be fair, we have been locked down most of that time.
I mean, we had this discussion, weren't we? That you guys were like able to go out and like have meals. So you were tier 1, and in the space of like 3 days, you suddenly shot to tier 4.
I know. Boris decided that we were obviously having too much fun, so he grounded us all.
Which is slightly bizarre, really.
It really was. It really, really was. So
yeah, you get.
Yeah. So it's probably quite appropriate that you've invited me on this evening to have a chat about kind of COVID and all of that kind of stuff, especially related to employment matters.
I mean, obviously your specialty. I always big you up anyway, Enter, but you obviously do TV and stuff similar to myself, and you and I have sort of collaborated before COVID on some stuff or planning to. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a biggie, isn't it? Really. And do you want to just tell people that are watching just kind of, what your specialty is and stuff, Donna? Just kind of, it's a broad spectrum, isn't it? What you do.
Yeah, it is. Thanks, Darren. So I am an employment solicitor. I have been for far too many years to mention. I also run an HR consultancy where we look after the HR for businesses, for about 160 businesses, which is quite exciting, which has been quite challenging during these times, actually. And, we can be bitey lawyers, but at the end of the day, we've also got people's lives in our hands. And unfortunately, some of those people haven't coped quite so well as others. And some people, there are winners and losers out of it. Some businesses have done incredibly well. And, we've helped some businesses take on their first employees, which is fantastic. People who've been made redundant from their roles and have thought, wow, I've got 20 grand that I never had. And have gone on to go and set up their own businesses and take on new employees, which is amazing. It's very, very cool. But at the same time, there are always losers in some of these situations, and unfortunately, we've made a significant number of people redundant or their roles redundant, which has been a real shame. A real shame.
Yeah, and I think when it all first kicked off, I mean, obviously I'm freelance, which was one of the sectors that got hit the most. And I've said before that literally I had my whole diary for 2020 just literally go up in smoke in one announcement. So it's been very challenging. Well, I've found it very challenging, especially. So have you found that some people have kind of, I mean, they have this word called pivot, with all these words that have come out, these new words in vocabulary, like lockdown and circuit breaker and all this caper. But one of the words was pivot, which I don't particularly like the word. But what have you found in terms of like people's ability to kind of like adapt? Is somebody more adept to kind of switching jobs or whatever? Do you know what I mean? Like, what have you found in terms of people's levels of resilience, etc.?
It's really interesting because those people who you almost expect to be really resilient are often those people who are probably the least resilient, I think. We've dealt with quite a few employees who, at very high management levels, you're very, very used to dealing with everyday stress and, understanding situations very quickly and being able to, very, very quickly see the wood for the trees. And suddenly they can't, and they can't cope. And you take them out of a working situation, you put them at home, you put them, in with the wife or the husband that they barely have had to see before this period of time, and now suddenly they're having to live with them again, which is always a problem, which I think lots of employers haven't really sort of caught up with. There's a lot of employers who are very much trying to kind of keep their businesses alive, and you totally understand that. But there are a lot of businesses who've forgotten about those employees who are at home, and quite often, the questions were asked, well, what? I mean, I have to give them holiday. When they've just had 5 months off, furlough. And you're just like, well, yeah, I know that feels really galling. And as a business owner, myself, you just think, I've worked every hour God sends in order to keep this business alive, and then suddenly you want to take holiday. When actually I'm trying to keep the business on its feet. It's quite difficult to then have to go back to those sort of managers and say, I know that's what the law says, but actually, have you really thought about the fact that they've had to spend that entire period of time at home? They haven't been able to go away on holiday. They've not been able to leave their houses. And so it's not really holiday. It was, they were asked to stay at home.
And I can remember talking to you like the other part of lockdown. I mean, I know you were going out at like midnight helping people, weren't you? Like 11 o'clock at night to kind of look in.
Absolutely. I mean, we had a guy who, had spent almost 3 months at home at that point, who had some serious mental health conditions, and who suddenly, when the employer went to check in on him, so, I mean, I'm going to give you some tips and hints on that kind of stuff in a moment, but when an employer tried to check in on him, they couldn't find him. He wasn't at home, the lights were on, his flatmate hadn't seen him for days. We had to get the police involved. It was, 11, 12 o'clock at night, and we were ringing the police and trying to get them involved. And eventually we found that he'd gone to go and help one of his friends paint his flat. So we, luckily he was fine, but, just the panic that happened because we couldn't find him. And that, again, you were asking about, how resilient some people are. His manager just went to pieces, absolutely went to pieces. And it's just like, come on, hold it together for just another couple of hours, because I can't do this on my own. I'm doing this remotely. You're near him. We can work it out, but just going to need to hold it together for a little bit longer.
And I guess because Cornwall is, sorry to cut you off, Donna, because Cornwall is quite remote in places, isn't it? I guess if you're on your own, I know, Arthur Cassidy in Belfast, they have a lot of remote areas like farming. There's big suicide rates in farming and the depression. And I guess, if someone's living on their own and no contact, I guess, they may be sort of towards Dartmoor or something, no contact, whatever. Again, it's so important to keep in touch, isn't it?
Absolutely. So I mean, some of the things we're saying to employers are, please ensure that you keep up internal communications. So, where people are seeing all their friends, family members, losing their jobs, there's a huge amount of uncertainty. And even if you work for a company who hasn't furloughed anybody, you are still going to be concerned that, there is, what are the economics? Why are we not furloughing people? Where is the business at? Has our business been affected? So it's really important to keep those internal communications going, and, ensuring that everybody understands, why you've made the choices that you have, and actually how safe are their jobs. Sort of being very open and honest. And if you think that, you may well be looking towards redundancies, let people know early. It gives them a chance to jump if they want to, but B, it mentally prepares people for, for that situation, especially if they've been working for you for, 15, 20 years. They're not going to know anything different, and people are frightened of change.
I think a lot of people were disgruntled. Was it back in September or October, when the original furlough ended? But then what they did was a lot of people basically got made redundant, and then they suddenly did a U-turn and extended it all over again, didn't they? So those people lost out.
Absolutely. So, and there are a lot of people, for example, if you were new to an organisation, say on full-time hours, as of the last lockdown and furlough extension, you were able to claim 80% of your pay as a full-time worker. If you had worked part-time hours back in the first lockdown, but had then increased your hours to full-time hours, for example, if you were in the hospitality industry, back in the first lockdown, you would have probably only been working part-time hours, because it was still in the winter months. So most people in Cornwall who were in the hospitality sector were, of course, only working part-time hours. And then obviously they increased their hours to full-time, and usually significantly more than full-time, especially chefs and things in the summer. which of course most of them did when we came out of lockdown, and we were allowed to move, but you lot weren't. But we took full advantage of that, I can assure you. There were more than 2 trips to the pub, I can assure you.
Well, I was about to come down and visit, and then like suddenly, boom! Like you're tier 4 now.
We obviously knew you were on your way. That was the problem.
I was looking forward to go to Jasper's, so we got to Jasper's on the quayside at Plymouth City, and then. But, I'm just going to say a quick hello to a few people that have jumped on. So I've got my friend Stu Hazard, Joe Hardy, Joe Marvin, hey Joe, Joe Ria, Al Price, how you doing, Hal? Chris Pearson, Dinah, how are you? Ryan Ward, Anisha, and Adam Kempin. How are you? It's been a while, Adam. I used to work with Adam in the place. Hope you're well. Has anybody got any questions for Donna? So if it doesn't have to be specifically about COVID, obviously, she's the UK's top banana and all this stuff, aren't you, Donna? So, so if you've got any questions, maybe you're self-employed or it could be about anything. I mean, a big one I guess we might look at is bullying. I mean, it's not specifically around COVID, but people get discriminated against, don't they, as well? I mean, have you found that's been a particular issue during this time? Anything to do with, people being bullied or feeling...
Off the back of, what I was, kind of talking about before, if you were, which kind of directly links to that. So if you were part-time and then you became full-time over the summer, by the end of the summer, when obviously we're now furloughing people again, you would only get your part-time wages. So if you were new and you were employed on full-time, you'd get your full-time wage, even if it dropped to part-time. So of course, who does that discriminate against? It discriminates against mostly part-time workers who happen to mostly be women. So, and unfortunately, of course, any claims that are going to be made against the government, because it was the government's decision to calculate it in that way. So it's that's an issue. In terms of bullying and stuff, I think randomly that's one of the things that's actually taken a back seat through COVID. And of course, most people are working at home. So, there is a lot of, we have had a lot of, so and so isn't pulling their weight. We believe that they're sitting at home doing nothing. But generally, my partner is hopefully listening into this, instead of playing on his Rubik's Cube, which I'm sure is what he's actually doing. He often, kind of says, yeah, but actually teams regulate themselves. And I actually think that's quite a good point. I think teams will regulate themselves. So if somebody's not pulling their weight, it will become quite evident. But yeah, realistically, I think that in terms of bullying and stuff, I think quite a lot of that, certainly from the work that we're undertaking at the moment, I think quite a lot of that has sort of fallen away, because that tends to happen when people are in groups and working in offices. Certainly a lot of the kind of sexual harassment stuff, there's going to be a lot of people who are very, very happy about the fact that we're all locked up at home. We're running 3 quite big sexual harassment cases at the moment, where if these things couldn't have happened if we were in lockdown. But I think coming out the other side though, coming out of lockdown, and perhaps once we're all vaccinated and we're all allowed out again, I guess that's going to be one of the things, is kind of being able to coach people back into offices. That's going to be a real difficulty.
I think you're right. I think there's a massive psychological fallout from this as well, isn't it? It's not just a case of, right, Boris has now, turned the tap off, so to speak, and everything's back to normal. I think the transition, it's taken a year for us to get used to where we are now, and to get back. Even when we went back to sort of, it's all numbers now, isn't it? When we went back to tier 2 or 3, whatever it was in Nottingham, people were still reluctant to go out, even when people were allowed to go into pubs and bars and at the city centre. Even though they could go out and still had to social distance, it was still like the Mary Celeste. So people were already kind of conditioned. So it's going to be interesting, like you say, how long is it going to take to get people back to where they're just used to shaking hands and hugging and just, sitting in a pub next to each other.
But also, do we want to go back to that? Do we want to go back to being in offices full time? It's pretty, when you think about how many hours you spend at work, kind of for some people, I've had a commute that's an hour and a half each way every single day. That's 3 hours of your life you're never going to get back again. And I really do believe that you really should make the most of every minute. We've both lost parents very, very early, and that's a huge belief of mine. And I do wonder actually whether any of us should be going back into that kind of situation. I do believe that for those of us who work in offices, going back to some sort of normality in that respect is good, but maybe not 5 days a week.
I think one thing that's come out of it, and I agree with what you're saying, my guest last week, Nigel, he was saying his daughter works for Google, and they've now realised they've got these vast sort of like glass churches, if you like, that they work in, but they've realised that they can function without having to come in every day. And so they've said, regardless of what happens with Boris, they're literally, you're going to be working from home until June, July, and then we're going to review it. So I think you're right. I think a lot of, certainly from the small sort of sample I've heard, is companies have suddenly realised that they don't have, or there is another way, really. There's an alternative way to doing things.
Absolutely. And the traditional sitting in an office, I mean, a couple of days a week, 2, 3 maybe days a week, I think is really healthy. But I do think there is a more educated way of working that needs to come out of all of this, a work-life balance. I mean, for years we have always had the worst work-life balance in Europe. It's always been, apart from the Germans apparently, but apart from that, we've always been known for having a terrible work-life balance, for working more hours. But we'll just have to see. And then we've obviously got Brexit coming, which but none of us are going to see any reality of it yet, I suspect.
Yeah. So another quick hello to people. So Lisa Gale, hey Stuart, how are you? Hope to see you soon, and we can hug and shake hands. Chris James, good to see you, hear from you, Chris. A very good friend of mine from Staffordshire. So have you guys got any experiences, or just general like epiphanies or experiences or realizations, or anything you want to ask Donna? Because now's your chance to take part. It doesn't have to be a specific question, just any general observations in terms of how's it been for you. How have you coped? I'll be the first one to say, because I'm naturally the sort of person that's always flying around, getting calls, sort of very short notice, having to flit to London and wherever. March, I was supposed to be back in Prague. I did a gig in Prague in November, and then they rebooked me for March. And I was gutted because I really loved it. I loved Prague. So for me, it's been that contact, and these things are great. I don't think there's no substitute for kind of being there for real. You know what I mean? I'm now starting to get some virtual gigs, and my normal work's starting to creep in towards the back end of the year already, which is a good sign. But I think one thing that has come out for me is that people have felt a great disconnection, from the, like you say, it's okay working 2 or 3 days a week. I mean, I've found that some of my colleagues that were working from home, that were employed, they've ended up doing much more hours than they do ordinarily. They're not interested in watching telly. They've actually been so much more productive than when they were spending 2 hours on the M25 or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's always been the case, but it's been quite difficult, especially having been a part-time worker for a period of time after I had my daughter. You actually end up doing full-time hours, but only being paid part-time, because you're so desperate to ensure that everybody knows that you're pulling your weight, that you actually end up doing significantly more than you would otherwise do, or doing as much as you probably would do if you were full-time. And certainly working from home, I think there's a lot of people who do feel that need to show that they can be trusted to work from home, because there is an inherent, you'll know this from a psychology point of view, everybody has got this inherent thing of not being trusted, and some people very much shouldn't be trusted. But there are also quite a lot of people who are absolutely nailing it at home. But it's about making sure that you look after those people, checking in with them often, making sure that they have all their kind of equipment at home and that they're not struggling. because many people who are struggling may not tell you unless you ask, because they're very proud people.
Absolutely. And I'm just thinking in terms of if someone's thinking about, starting a new business. I mean, my guest last week, he's wrote a book on how to get the job of your dreams during a pandemic. Do you think, it's probably a daft question, but do you think, is it a really bad time right now to maybe start a business or look to do something, start up your own business or work for somebody else? What's your thoughts on, if someone's got an idea they want to try out, would it be to wait and see how things go, or what would be your opinion on that? Is it a bit too turbulent?
This is, you know me very well, and you know my cup is always half full. Hell no, go for it.
Yeah, that's what I think.
There's never a bad time to start a business if you've got a really good idea. I mean, obviously, probably looking at your market and understanding what it is you want to do and who you're going to target and whether or not those people are around is probably quite a good idea. And really understanding what it is that you want to do. But no, I think now is as good a time as any. And that, like I say, there are so many businesses that we have helped. 3 in the last week have taken. We've written employment contracts for people who, for businesses who've taken on their first employee and only started during the pandemic. So, and I think this is the thing, is that those who are willing to adapt and change and move at a pace will be the ones who survive. Those who sit and whinge and, oh, woe is me, and isn't the world a terrible place?
Yeah.
I think you're right. People won't talk to you when you're like that. We've
got a mutual friend just saying hi. So Shane Solomon.
Solomon.
Hey, look at these two movers and shakers. Good evening to you, if you lovely people. Hi, Shane. We will get to meet at some point. So Shane runs the Cornwall channel in Cornwall. So you've been on there loads of times, haven't you?
Oh yeah, that's where my telly celebrity started, I'm afraid.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely we'll definitely meet up. Obviously, I'm down there in July, touch wood, to run Murder in Mind Live at the golf club in Plymouth. So we're looking forward to that. Gemma, who's a good friend of mine, she's put the best thing that ever happened to me was the pandemic. How bizarre. So I think you're right. I think that probably the same people that would thrive in a normal environment seem to be thriving now. And I remember my accountant saying to me recently, I've got a client that literally set up on Amazon, and he sits in his back bedroom playing his PlayStation, and he just literally just sells headphones out of his back bedroom. So something as bizarre as that, and why not?
Absolutely. And we see evidence of this all the time. I mean, you're not going to see a huge amount of that in the media, because that's not what they want to paint. They want to paint that everything's doom and gloom and we're all going to die and it's all apocalyptic. But the reality of it is that, those people who are going to survive are going to survive. I mean metaphorically, I don't mean exactly. And that's the same in business. You've always got to move and adapt. You've always got to, change depending on your market, depending on your customers. And if you don't do that, you were never going to survive whether or not there was a pandemic.
Absolutely. And I think certainly in terms of, like, for me, like, I've just learned so many new things. Like, I would pay somebody ordinarily to go out and say, create my promo videos, things like that. So I actually taught myself video editing during lockdown. And that's why you suddenly see all these videos popping up. I'm like a kid in the sweet shop. But the thing was that I thought, well, I'd rather learn to do it myself. Say again, Donna. Say again. Yeah, so
I said, don't say that. His livelihood.
Yeah. So rather sort of, but yeah, some people have lost their income. So rather than paying out, I've learned it myself. So I think it for me, I've got a lot from it. So much indeed. I think I wouldn't want to go through it for too much longer, but I think a lot of people have had quite a few, I call them epiphanies, but I've had realizations. Maybe they've realized that, that they were doing really well in the business, but then not so well in other areas of life. So I think, I think reconnection seems to be sort of a thing for a lot of people, just to go sit and talk,
And I think it's a really good time to reflect, actually. You know, the first day I had my daughter at home for homeschooling, I actually thought, do you know this? I actually quite like it. I mean, the first time I had to homeschool, I realised I was terrible at it. But this time I'm actually really quite enjoying having her around. And, you know, it's one of those things where actually, if you've got time to take stock and understand, you know, what it is in your life you enjoy and what you don't enjoy, and, you know, if you've been in a job that you hate, you know, actually being made redundant is a lifeline, because it's money you would never have had to go and spend on setting up something you've always wanted to do. You know, not everybody is able to run a business. I believe that. Some people are just, you know, are not cut out for the sleepless nights. But, you know, that's fine. You can still be employed somewhere else and still do something, you know, with that money that makes you happy.
Yeah.
You know, a new hobby, something you've always wanted to do. And that's, you know, when I sit down with, you know, employees who I'm having to have that really difficult conversation with, you know, I always, the last round of redundancies I dealt with, I had cards from them saying, thank you for, you know, dealing with it in such a humane manner.
Really.
We don't just deal with the legal aspects, but it's about sitting down and saying, okay, you know, the reality of it is, you know, you're looking down the barrel of a gun. I can't tell you the outcome yet because I'm not allowed to, and you know, things may well change, and they did in that particular instance. But you know, if the worst comes to the worst, you know, this is the amount of money that we're looking at. We can probably give you a bit more to help out. You know, what is it you want to do with your life? You know, when you were 20 or 15 or 12, you didn't think you're going to be driving a delivery van for the rest of your life. So what is it that you wanted to do? You know, what is your dream? You know, what is it that you've always wanted to do that now's a great time to do it? And I had one lady who said to me, I've always wanted to be a midwife. And so she's gone to go and train to be a midwife.
That's amazing.
Which is very different from the job she was doing as an admin assistant. And again, you know, she said, and I've had another guy who I'm, you know, friends with on Facebook who again, almost every day sends me a thank you of some description because he now has the job he always wanted. Not that he didn't like the job he had, but it's just given him that opportunity to go and do something different. And I think that's so important.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think there's an expression that I've got in my book, which I really love. And it says, you'll never discover new oceans without first losing sight of the shore. And I think people, you know, they're so often, and I guess it's fear. It's a belief factor that, you know, that they're going to go under, they're going to have a problem, or, you know, they're going to struggle. And, you know, a lot of the time when I do a lot of corporate speaking, you know, I'll say to the audience, which is generally about 1,000 people, I'll say, hands up if you're doing the job right now that you wanted to do when you were younger or you were a kid. And you probably get about one person puts their hand up. So I think you're absolutely right. Most people don't end up doing what they wanted to do.
You know, or sitting with them and saying, okay, let's look at the financials of this. Do you actually even need to work? You know, you're 55, you just told me that you've nearly paid your mortgage off, which is why you're not that concerned. But actually you want to keep your mind active. Well, maybe buying a holiday home abroad and spending more time traveling. Have you been to see the world? The world doesn't end at the Tamar Bridge, albeit some people think it does. You know, I mean, although none of us are doing any blinging traveling at the moment, you know, it's where my passion lies.
Yeah, totally.
If I could crack on with a backpack every day, I would. Yeah,
I'm just going to say a quick hello to Al Price. He said he's worked in his office well before the pandemic, so it hasn't impacted me much. Missed the pub. I'm going to the footy. I do worry longer term about the economy, companies having to pay back the bounce back loans, etc. Could you kind of touch upon that, Donna? That whole kind of...
Yeah, I have a horrible feeling there is going to be... I mean, I know there were a lot of people who borrowed it who knew they were never going to be able to pay it back. A lot of people who borrowed it because it was a very cheap way of borrowing money and spent it on other things, which is now going to leave them with a problem. I was listening to a Radio 4 program the other day about, you know, about the kind of bounce back loan situation. About, you know, the fact that you had to use it in your business. You have to show that you used it in your business in order to support your business during the pandemic. And the amount of people who took out their bounce back loans in order to buy a Range Rover for their wife. or a new
A
hot
lot
tub.
of people that done things like that.
And, the reality of it is that if they then can't pay it back, the banks are now looking at making them, or the government are now trying to look at how they're going to do that to make those people personally liable, because they haven't adhered to the terms of the bounce back loan.
I think there's been widespread fraud as well, because I know I not that I don't know them, but I know a few people, acquaintances, where they were applying for things, for grants and things like that, and they definitely weren't entitled to it. But there was very few checks. Literally fill out a form, and then within a couple of weeks, they got this abundance of money.
Sometimes it was only hours.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult. And then there are other companies who they already know that when they took the bounce back loan out, these were dormant companies, or companies that were not necessarily dormant companies' house, but weren't really active. They used to take the bounce back loan out, and then hey presto, we've been the company, and all the liability goes with it.
Yeah, I read about one company. I think I read a couple of companies. One was 100k, and one was 300k, and they were just dormant companies. So, and then the company.
Huge fraud, wasn't there, with the fraudsters taking out a bounce back loan but having it paid elsewhere, against the company. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes out in the wash at the end of it. But there will be a huge amount of liquidations, I think, where borrowed the money that they knew that they were never going to pay back, and actually by binning the company, especially if they don't employ anybody, they get rid of the liability.
Right, simple as that, really, is it? Let's see. So Stuart Kerry, sorry.
That's not legal advice.
Yeah, don't quote me.
Legal advice.
Just to show back on Stuart just mentioned when we were having a discussion about reconnection, it says it's given us time with people who matter, and we take stock of what's important. I think that's right. I think not. I guess we, a lot of people have always valued family, valued friends, but when you can't sort of just meet up, because as you know, I live in coffee shops generally, and I write for the papers and stuff, and it's just been really bizarre. I've worked from home just literally, obviously, 99% of the time, and I have found that I've been like so much more productive. And I used to think, I've worked 15 hours today, and what I've learned is, Donna, that working a lot of hours doesn't mean diddly squat. I can work 2 hours and be so much more productive. So for me, I learned that times there's no correlation between sitting in front of a Mac and the productivity. You can be just as productive at home with a coffee watching the telly.
Absolutely. But but also, there are the flip side of that is that we're dealing with quite a lot of situations where people aren't doing a huge amount at home when they should be, and at the moment, it's really tough. People are trying to homeschool and look after their puppy and deal with an elderly relative, and the husband they hate but they have to live with now. That's driving them round the bend. It's not to drive anyone to drink.
I was laughing then when you said about people, not doing stuff, because I've got a friend who works in banking, and they've got some software, and it measures if you're actually working, if you move the mouse. So what they did, they actually they discovered that if you get the mouse and tilt it on its side, and then she's got like a Rolex with a sweeping second hand. So if you put the watch against the mouse, it basically looks like the mouse is going like this. So they were like, God, you're so busy. You're up at 3 o'clock in the morning. The way around everything. But they've got this particular bank have got this software to monitor staff. But yeah, she got the top. She was most productive in November, apparently.
So many of the
ideas. You dropped out then, Donna.
Most of CID are working from home. Sorry, most of CID
really?
and the police are working from home, and they have the same software that it shows when they've logged on and how often they've pressed the keys and all of that kind of stuff.
Say nothing.
Yeah, I know. Darren, I hear you know some things about this.
Oh yeah, I'm just gonna say a quick shout out to my friend Gareth as well, because he's gone, Gareth, Daz, I love you. So I'm just going to sorry to Gareth.
Gareth. Feeling left out.
I say, yeah, Gareth's actually a murder in mind. You'd be meeting Gareth at some point. And then Kieran Bainbridge, how are you doing? I haven't seen anyone really. I've literally just been playing the PlayStation and he's doing my head in. What games you like, Kieran? What have you been playing? So any questions? Hey, Sylvia, how are you? Sylvia's was my mum's best friend. Sylvia's just jumped on to say hello. And then Gemma said, everyone I know who had loans from the government or grants for self-employment blew it on jacuzzis or garden furniture, new backbooks, etc. However, paid off my household bills, extras for 12 months, so I had no fear. And funnily enough, still surviving and thriving. Gemma, I've known Gemma a long time. I was in the police with her. And Gemma, I'll be honest with you, talk about detection. Apart from you, obviously, Donna, I've never met a person that's more straight and honest. That she's one of these people that will love it or like it or lump it. She'll tell you exactly what she thinks, and she's brilliant. And again, I'm proud of what Gemma's done because she's had so many different businesses, and she continues to graft very hard. And no matter what happens, every time she gets knocked down, she's back up again. So just really proud of you, Gemma. You're doing amazing yet again.
Well done, Gemma.
Daniel,
that's what it's all about, actually, Darren. There's a lady that I know that I'll introduce you to in Plymouth who, she had a very successful cleaning company, but during lockdown, she set up a coronavirus support group, which has now got 6,000 people in it.
Wow.
And then off the back of that, she set up a sort of online business growth type thing, which is absolutely thriving, and is helping sort of local businesses thrive through these times. But she's also opened 2 shops and bought a house and renovated it.
That is amazing.
From scratch. I mean, Carly's a proper grafter, and I think that's the point of all of this is that those people who are willing to put in the time, the effort, the hard work, and and who generally have that support around them will thrive no matter what the circumstances.
No, I think you're right. I think it just comes down to the individual, doesn't it? That no matter. I mean, things. I hope this never happens again, but there's always going to be things happen to people. There's always going to be, catastrophes and various life events that happens to us all. Like you say, we've both gone through a lot in the last few years, and I kind of turned that grief into strength. And it was like my mum's anniversary recently, 21st of December. So I had a bit of a couple of days where I was just crying my eyes out. I'm happy to say that. But it wasn't permanent. I got through it, and I cracked on with it. And we've all got those sort of experiences, I guess. But
and I think that's quite important in the way you deal with employees as well, is to think about it that way, and that just creating an open and honest forum for people to be able to say, I'm struggling, I'm actually really. And one of the things that we teach in leadership is that one of the key things is to be open and honest, and if you're struggling, to tell people you're struggling, because actually those people below you need to understand that there are good days and there are bad days, and that it's okay that some days you're not okay. And I think kind of this is what we're saying to employers, is that if you're working remotely, trying to check in with people, even if you have like an afternoon 30-minute Zoom call where you're welcome to join us if you want, or if you're busy in the middle of something, but we do want to see you at least a couple of times a week for a quick check-in on that Zoom call where everybody gets to see a face. So if you're remote, you still get to see someone. And just sending out, we've got an employer who's super lovely, and they're not clients of ours, but I know them very well, and they send out these lovely little well-being packs to all of their employees, which cost them like £3.50. But it's something that says we value you, and absolutely. But when you're having those face-to-face calls, it's much more difficult if you are struggling to be able to hide it. And so if you've been trained to be able to spot that, and I would suggest training people to be able to spot when someone is struggling, to then be able to have a kind of private conversation with them and see what you can do to help, and signpost them to organisations. There's plenty of help out there. at this moment in time, or getting them involved in in something which kind of helps to take away that monotony that can kind of draw in, especially if you're on your own.
Yeah. And I think also Gareth's just made a good point, actually, because I don't know what it's like in Cornwall, Donna, but we have certainly Nottingham in the Midlands, like massive homelessness, and Gareth just put we need to pull together and to help the homeless, because I try and do my bit. I won't give money, but I'll always try and give food and stuff. And I just think to myself, in this day and age, we're not living in Dickensian times. Like we're talking about child poverty, and we've had all that stuff with Matt Hancock, where the kids have been given a ridiculous amount of food for a week and all that. So I do. I mean, have you got any thoughts on? It's not technically within your remit, I guess, the homeless, but have you got any thoughts on that? Have you got like, a particular issue in Cornwall with that, or not?
So we do quite a lot to help Petrox, which is the local homeless local homeless charity. So up until relatively recently, every Tuesday we were my partner and I were busy cooking meals to take down to the Homeless Neighbours Club. And what was quite interesting is just the array of people. I mean, their statistic is we are only one pay packet away from being homeless. Every one of us, we're one mortgage payment away from being homeless, and that's really quite scary. And the same with the Shekinah Mission in Plymouth, do a similar sort of thing. And I've been kind of helping them less with the kind of food situation, but more with kind of helping them to tender for helping employees who have lost their jobs, who've got no self-esteem, their wife's gone, you're a loser because you can't pay the mortgage anymore, get out of my house, because actually I get more without you in it.
It's terrible.
You're out on the street, you've got nothing, and you lose your confidence. And so one of the things that we've been kind of helping them with is running sort of masterclasses with them on CV writing and that kind of stuff, and interview techniques, and just rallying them a bit. I mean, they call it the Donna love. Everybody needs a bit of Donna love from time to time, apparently. And it is just kind of rallying them, but also helping the mission to find roles for them to be able to get back into work. Because because having had a child myself, it's funny how I was a professional woman, I had my own caseload, I was going to court, etc., and then suddenly I had a baby and I was just Harriet's mum. I didn't have a name anymore, I had no identity anymore, and that's really tough actually when you're used to having that kind of professional life. And that's the same with some of the people who are now homeless, is that they've lost everything, including that kind of professional life that they had, and they feel so ashamed. And I think it's about understanding that, but for the grace of God, any one of us could be there.
Absolutely, and I think you're right. I mean, identity, like it's like if you go to normal circumstances, if you went to a party or went to a networking event or any other kind of gathering, the first thing people say, "Oh, what do you do?" And it's almost like people need, or they seem to need, to have that information to kind of make an evaluation. And I guess it's wrong, because if you turn around and say, well, I'm homeless, even if you're dressed well, that people make a judgment and an inference. And, I agree with you, Donna, that we are literally one or two payments away from being in that situation, and I often help people and I say, how did you, just if you don't mind me asking you, how did you get like this? And a lot of it's, Gemma made a comment about the media. I don't believe it's all about drugs and things like that. They may get into drugs, but essentially it's about maybe they weren't wanted as a kid by the parents, or the parents have died, or carers have died, or something else has happened, and there's been this steady decline, and found themselves in that situation. So what I've found is that there's some people I'm on my soapbox here, but they tend to dehumanize certain sectors of society, and I think the homeless people, and they kind of dehumanize them as being less human than themselves, which I think is it's really wrong.
And I think we all have a responsibility for that. We are in a situation where animals get treated better than people in some respects. At Christmas, I helped out with with delivering food boxes to families in need. And I think there was somewhere around 400 or 350 or so food boxes. that were delivered just to a very small local area. We're probably talking, I don't know, maybe a 40-mile radius from a particular pinpoint, maybe less. I'm looking across the room to the man who organised it, from a distance from Camborne.
10 miles.
Maybe a 10-mile radius. I mean, I guess 40 out by the sounds of it. And so, for that many families to be so desperately in need, and this is a food box with some presents for the kids, because, otherwise some of them probably wouldn't get anything. And when you're delivering those food boxes and they open the door and there's no carpet, and, you can see these guys are on their knees. And, in 2021, how are people in that situation? There is something fundamental that we need to achieve that stops that from happening.
I think you're right, and there was a comment on LinkedIn the other day because someone was having a bit of a rant about the government's paying £30 for this tiny little box where they get like 5 bottles of water, and it was just a ridiculous small amount of food. And somebody said LinkedIn's not the place for this. Go on Facebook. And I just put a comment on there because I don't often get drawn into stuff now. But I said, yeah, but LinkedIn, it tends to be more professional people. This is probably a better platform to highlight certain things than it is Facebook. So I think Facebook tends to be, it's a lot of white noise, really, in a way. I find sometimes it's a great way to communicate, but I think, in my opinion, I think it's just froth. So there's other platforms that probably get the message out a bit better. Just going to see what somebody else has said. Yeah, so Gareth, I'm not going to embarrass him, but Gareth does a lot to help people, and he's put, be kind and stay humble, because you just don't know the future. You don't know what's going to happen. We're all optimistic and positive people, but the truth is we don't know. Not being a bit pessimistic, but so I think it's important to treat people properly, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think it's also about looking to the future and working out why we've got this problem, how we're going to solve it for generations to come. Because the generation that we're in now, yes, we can help, but actually we need to be looking at how we're going to solve this problem going forward. And, I think it's very much about, helping a whole generation of kids who are coming through now to have aspirations. They may well be in a family where they may well be the 4th generation who've never worked.
Yeah.
Especially in some industrial areas that are no longer industrial. And so they have no aspirations. I've been told a story about, children at secondary school, the girls waiting until they're 15 and 3 months to get pregnant because they know then they'll be ready to have a baby at 16, so they'll get a house. It's about understanding that mentality, and being able to, teach people very early on about, how you infuse people and give them a life choice that they don't believe that they currently have, and rally people. I've spoken to the lovely Cindy Wilcox today, who runs a charity, a CIC in Plymouth, who helps women between the ages of sort of 14 and 25 who have no aspirations, and it's very much a rally of pairing them up with local celebrities and Alexis Bowater, who's off the TV, and various things, to try and sort of mentor these young women, to help them choose a different lifestyle if they want one. And I think that's so important. I think that's where we need to be concentrating our efforts, is on the next generation to come, so that we haven't got the huge problem of, if I was homeless, I'd probably want to be drugged up most of the time. I wouldn't want to face the reality.
You would, wouldn't you? I think, and that's kind of echoed by, well, I'll try to just put a comment on, just putting, governments love to spend money on lampposts, but feeding people's far more important. And I guess it's that old adage about, teaching someone to fish, isn't it? Rather than just giving them the fish, teach them to fish, let them be self-reliant. And, some years ago, there was a guy in Nottingham who sold The Big Issue. And it struck my eye one day because it was so resilient, Donna. Like, people were telling him to basically do one. But his resilience was just absolutely fantastic, and his motivation. And I found out he was at the top seller of Big Issue. And I got talking to him. I used to buy him a coffee here and there and stuff, and a burger. And I said, if we take you out of this situation, his name was Kieran. I said, if we take you out of the situation, Kieran, and we maybe put you in a sales position in a suit, with your tenacity and your get up and go, I said, you could smash it, and I actually got him an interview with Motorpoint, which is a well-known massive car place in the Midlands. And just at the point he was about to get a job, he disappeared off the face of the earth. So I knew him for about 3 or 4 years, and then he just disappeared. So I hope he was all right, but he just vanished. But he was basically about to start a job. But the point is that we've all got resources within us. We've all got, motivation and passion and the ability to do things that we probably don't even realise until it's pointed out to us. And that was one such person that really shone out as someone that could have turned it around.
Absolutely, and I mean, there was a guy in Truro, in Cornwall, who was busking, but he was also in his spare time helping people fix bikes, and now he owns his own bike shack.
Wow.
Where it's obviously been funded by local businesses to help him out. But he was making a profit from day one, helping people to fix their own bikes, teaching people how to fix their own bikes, or actually doing the job. And it's just brilliant. And then when you delve back into his history, you find out that he was, some sort of, kid who was really into BMXs and, had been in some sort of championship type situation, and had built his own bikes from scratch. It's amazing what's in people's armory that you don't necessarily know about. And often when we're talking to employers, it's the same kind of conversation of, well, okay, this person might not be very good at this, but have you actually worked out what they might be good at? Because if they're really loyal, and that's the thing, about kind of helping people, is if you've got an employee who's really super loyal, you can't buy loyalty.
No, not at all.
Job that they can do. I mean, I'm not suggesting creating a job where you don't need one, but finding out what they can do and adapting your business and changing and etc. in order to move with the times, but also helping an employee at the same time, it's got to be a really great thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely, I totally agree with you.
You do that by communicating with people, chatting to people.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And Kieran, I'm not ashamed to say that I've moved out into the worst possible time, and I'm young. I can say that my dogs probably saved my life. It's such a strange time at the moment. So talking about connection. Just a quick hello to Linda, Alan Marwood. Hey, Alan, nice to work with Alan in the police. Eddie Klusky, John Lingard, how are you? And then Al's put, I think school teaches kids to only learn and remember stuff rather than create. So it's just very much regurgitation, I guess, isn't it? I guess it's the same at uni as well, is that it's about, can you pass that exam? But I think one thing that's come out for me through this is the creative aspect to it. So you could get somebody that's probably not academically very good, but then they're creative and they've created, a business out of absolutely nothing and made it successful in a very short space of time. So I think a lot, I don't you think
Darren, that, is it, Branston, who couldn't read properly, and various people off of the Dragon's Den who grew up on council estates and had nothing and weren't educated, etc. I don't think being highly educated makes you a great entrepreneur.
I think look at Elon Musk and people like that. They never went to college, did they?
I think being frightened of failure makes you a very good entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Being able to dust yourself out, not seeing it as a fail, but seeing it as a learning point, dusting yourself off and cracking on again. I think that's spirit.
I think so. That resilience. And I think not preaching about it, but I think going through hardship, it's not nice at the time, but as you look back, it does give you a frame of reference. I tend to think that's why the people that have gone through a lot of crap, tend to kind of prosper. Do you not think? Because if you've never had I'm not saying there are all these people, but if you've never had really a day of a hardship, if you're from a very privileged background, you've never worried about paying the bills or paying the rent or the mortgage. And I don't know, I don't think that's probably the best place to be, because you can lose that. And where you're going to be.
Well, but I saw quite a famous, and I don't know if this is true, but I'm sure it is, quite a famous interview with Bill Gates where he said, we're leaving our children nothing. because
saw that.
because we want them to understand A, the value of money, and B, we want them to go and earn their own. Because actually privilege doesn't, is not a great thing. And so they everything to their Gates Foundation or whatever it is, and not left their kids a penny.
Yeah, I think it's quite. I think Gordon Ramsay's very much like that as well, Donna. He's kind of said, I'll help you out, I'll get you a car and stuff, but don't think you're going to just inherit like 30 million quid. Excuse me.
I think there's some merit in that, actually. I think there really is some merit.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing, really, because I think if you just suddenly, if you don't want for anything, where's the value in that?
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
It goes back to what you were saying about what's being taught in schools, and the trouble is that what's being taught in schools is very much being fed to them by government. So they don't have a huge amount of choice, and there's quite a lot that they have to do in quite a small amount of time. So I don't blame the teaching staff at all.
No.
But there are some really great initiatives going on now. Such as we're helping out with the Junior Dragons Den at the local school. Where teams, the final year students are divided into small teams, and they have to, come up with a product and a business idea and how it's going to be financed and how much it costs to make, and then actually make it and go and sell it. I mean, whether or not they'll be able to do it this year, I don't know, because of COVID.
Great idea. Fantastic.
Well, they'll have to do it online.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they'll have to move with the times as well, as we were discussing earlier. We'll see how adaptable our children are, and if they're not, they're out. Cheers and gone. I know it could be tough on children, but I very much think teaching, which is why I'm enjoying having Harriet at home. She's very much, listening to me, talking to clients and advising clients, and really getting her to understand the commercials of decisions that are made. That you may not have the money at the moment, but making someone redundant is expensive for many reasons. Mainly because if business picks up, you're going to have to replace that person. It's going to be really difficult to do. Yeah. So she's starting to really understand the commercials of how life works, which I don't think you can teach in any other way.
And I can give you an example of that, because last time I was down, we were playing poker and she took me for £6.
She did. Although the ABC trick that you taught her, everyone had that trick.
Just see who else has put a comment on. So Sarah Jane Woodall, hey, how are you, Sarah? If you earn your own money, you absolutely appreciate it. Gemma's put, please don't use money correctly. Please don't use money correctly. It's why lottery winners are broke. Do you know what? That's an interesting comment, that a lot of people that get money sort of out of nowhere. I read a book about this. They call it the first flush. So if somebody suddenly maybe inherits money, statistically they'll blow it really quickly. They'll just go out and buy cars, and whatever, just go on stupid holidays. So I think if you work for it, you're more likely to hang on to it. And I think a lot of billionaires, millionaires, what you mentioned earlier on, Donna, was about poverty, this fear of poverty sort of thing. So I think even if someone's super rich, they've still got that fear of being broke. And I think that's why sometimes they're perceived as being very tight and fastidious, but they're really just so fearful of being poor. And that seems to be quite a common trait with a lot of entrepreneurs that are very wealthy.
Absolutely. But, that's the way of the world. And that's what keeps in business.
So we're just about out of time. So has anybody got any questions for Donna? Any other final observations? Be nice to get quite a lot of likes. Now, if you guys, if you want to subscribe and like my page, also my YouTube, I'm trying to get my YouTube figures up. So my YouTube channel's Darren Stanton Live. So if you guys could subscribe and press the bell on that, that'd be greatly appreciated. And then finally, Gemma just put, because rich just means your money is invested wisely. So it's been a pleasure as always. So thank you so much for spending an hour talking to people, Donna. I'm sure people have got a great deal from it. If everyone can just give a big, I say shout out, they've got a shout out, but give us a big thumbs up for Donna for coming on tonight. That'd be great. I'll leave the final word with you. Anything in closing that you'd like to sort of say? Any words of wisdom? Any final closing things you'd like to say? How can people get in touch with you?
Well, I was just going to say thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to have a chat with you. Have a chat generally about my feelings and stuff about stuff. If people want to get in contact with me, they can do so. My email is donna@sequoia.com. And you can find us on the web. Look for HR in Cornwall, and we come right at the top of the page, so you can't miss us. But yeah, if there's anything, there we go, across the bottom of the page.
Well, I did earlier.
It's by magic. Yeah, and I think it's just about, there's never a reason. My thing I always say to people is, there is never ever a reason to be rude or unkind, and always a reason to help somebody. And if we all help each other, then we all come out the other end. If we don't help each other, then none of us achieve it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for watching tonight, guys. Next week, I've got Lisa Palmer, who is the relationship expert from GMTV. So she's going to be talking about people that have dated on Zoom and things like that. So she's really fun. She's lovely. So for now, thanks a lot, Donna. Just stay on for a second. I'll have a quick chat with you. And then thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next week. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Take it from me. User experience